welcome to the deep dive. Today we're pulling back the curtain on something pretty fascinating. What it's really like for medical students tackling their fourth semester at Mansoura National University.
Yeah, we've got a stack of material here, basically excerpts from their student guide, and it maps out, well, pretty much everything. What systems they'll be digging into, how they get tested, the resources, all of it.
And our mission here in this deep dive is to sort of cut through all that detail, find the really crucial bits, and give you, the listener, a genuine feel for the sheer depth of knowledge these students are building. If you've ever wondered about, the foundational steps doctors take, this is like a look inside the engine room. Let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the guide, it kicks off with a pretty warm tone, doesn't it? Calling the university a home away from home.
It does. You get a real sense of excitement from the faculty, welcoming students back, that whole campus buzz returning.
Yeah.
And the messages from the director and the chief tutor, they really set the stage. They talk about gaining profound knowledge, especially in a, quote, rapidly evolving field.
Which medicine definitely is.
Absolutely. And they promise this cheerful and joyful experience, showing support. But they immediately pair that with stressing the need for student effort, discipline, and commitment.
The classic combo, high support, high expectations.
Exactly. They make it clear those are the keys. Non-negotiable, really.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts then. Semester 4, it's part of year 2. What's the actual structure look like?
Well, it's built around 4 core modules, plus they have an elective in there too, and it all adds up to 30 credit points for the semester.
30 points? That sounds like a pretty significant workload.
Oh, it is. It's typical for a full-time, pretty demanding academic term, yeah.
So these modules,
Okay.
what ground are they actually covering?
Okay, the big one, credit-wise, is the Central Nervous and Special Sense Systems, Behavioral Science, and Psychology module, CBS 401. That's a hefty 14 points.
Wow.
Then you've got the Endocrine and Reproductive System module, ENR 402. That's 8 points. Research and Biostatistics, RBS 403, is 4 points. And Early Clinical Experience 3, ECE 404, that's 2 points.
And the elective adds another couple of points.
Yep, another 2 points for the elective.
That is a massive scope. Brain, senses, hormones, reproduction, research methods, and starting clinical skills. How do they even assess all of that?
Well, the assessment structure is quite comprehensive. They use a point system for the core modules, totaling 420 points overall.
420 points, okay.
And it's definitely not just final exams. It includes midterm exams sort of scattered through the semester. Points for basic things like activity and attendance, sure, but also significant weight on problem-based learning.
PBL. So getting them to apply the knowledge right away, not just, recite it.
Exactly. Working through realistic patient scenarios. Then there are points tied to something called the Incision platform and an e-portfolio. We can probably circle back to those.
Okay.
But a really big chunk, 210 points, that's half the total, comes from the final OSPOC.
OSPOC. Okay, remind us what those stand for.
Right, sorry. Objective Structured Practical Examination, that's OSPE, and Objective Structured Clinical Examination, OSCE. They're basically performance exams.
Performance exams,
Right.
like practical tests.
Exactly. Students rotate through different stations, and at each one they have to demonstrate a skill. Might be identifying anatomical structures, interpreting lab results, maybe interacting with a standardized patient to take a history or perform an exam maneuver.
So it's about doing medicine, not just writing about it.
Precisely. And alongside that, they do have the more traditional final written exams for the modules too, often a mix of multiple choice questions, MCQs, and short answer questions, SAQs.
Right. And the elective, is that graded the same way?
No, the elective is actually just pass-fail. Seems to be based mainly on activity and attendance rather than formal exams.
Gotcha. So they're being tested constantly in lots of different ways, written, practical, performance-based. What about the timeline? How does this semester actually play out week by week?
Okay, looking at the semester format, it shows a pretty intense 15 weeks of study. Then there's a study break, and then the final exams hit, spanning weeks 19 through 21.
15 weeks. That really is a compact sprint to the finish line.
It is, and some modules, like that big nervous system one, CBS 401, and also research, RBS 403, and early clinical experience, ECE 404, they seem to run for most or even all of those 15 weeks.
Okay, so they're continuous threads.
Right. Others, like the endocrine and reproductive module, ENR 402, that one looks like it starts a bit later, maybe around week 8, but you can bet it ramps up quickly then.
And you mentioned midterms weren't just, like, neatly in the middle.
Correct. There are multiple midterms scheduled throughout those 15 weeks. It really signals that continuous assessment approach. You can't just cram at the end.
Yeah, you fall behind fast.
Definitely. And the guide does mention that all timetables are provisional, which probably makes sense with such a packed schedule. Things might need to shift a bit.
Okay, so the guide's summary section,
Right.
it feels like it really tries to get into the philosophy behind this semester, the why.
It does. The main goal is clearly building a really solid foundation in the basic sciences. But crucially, they do it using a systems-based approach.
Systems-based, meaning,
Meaning, instead of having separate, like, siloed courses in anatomy, then physiology, then pathology, they center the learning around specific organ systems, like the nervous system or the endocrine system. And within that system, they explore everything: normal structure, normal function, and what goes wrong.
and here's the part I found really interesting. They explicitly mention weaving together anatomy, histology, physiology, biochemistry, microbiology, pharmacology, pathology, parasitology, and even biostatistics,
Yeah.
all focused on the same system. That's a lot of different scientific angles.
It is. And integrating these basic sciences like that is just,
Yeah.
well, it's critical. Think about understanding, say, the nervous system. You need the map, the structure that's anatomy and histology.
Yeah.
You need to know how the signals work, the function physiology, biochemistry. Then what happens when it breaks or gets infected? Pathology, microbiology, parasitology.
And the drugs that affected pharmacology.
Exactly. Teaching them together like this helps students see those connections right away. It's not just separate buckets of facts.
That must be incredibly helpful later on, connecting the dots between a patient's symptoms and the underlying science.
Absolutely. This integration really tries to bridge that gap between the basic science you learn in lectures and the clinical medicine you'll eventually practice. They're correlating symptoms with pathophysiology early on.
Makes sense.
And they even add another layer of weekly online quizzes starting right from week 2, posted every Friday. Just constant reinforcement.
Wow, okay. Let's maybe touch on some of these individual sciences then, not listing every single topic, but just highlighting what each one brings to this integrated picture. Anatomy and embryology first.
Sure. Anatomy is the structure, right? Mapping the body's physical form. They use lectures, but also practical sessions, probably with models, maybe even cadavers, though it doesn't explicitly say.
And embryology.
Embryology is part of anatomy here, but it focuses on development, how structures form. And that can be really challenging because, a developing system often looks very different from the final adult version. They mention small group teaching for that, likely for tackling those complex processes.
So in semester 4, they're applying this to map out the nervous system, the eyes, ears, endocrine glands, reproductive organs.
Precisely, getting that physical blueprint.
Okay, so if anatomy is the blueprint, physiology must be how it all works. As the motion, the function.
Correct. Physiology is all about normal function. How do nerve signals travel? How do hormones regulate things? How does vision or hearing actually happen? Again, lectures and practicals, focusing on things like sensory input, movement control, sleep, memory, and the detailed workings of the endocrine and reproductive hormone cycles.
Then histology zooms right in, doesn't it? Using microscopes to see the tissues and cells.
Yep, understanding that microscopic architecture. Lectures, practicals, using microscopes, discussion groups. They'd be looking at the cellular details of, say, the cerebral cortex or the retina or the different types of cells in the pituitary gland or the ovaries.
Okay, and pharmacology. That's the drugs.
Pharmacology, yeah, understanding how drugs interact with the body, how they work, what they do, side effects, how the body handles them. Lectures and practicals again. And for this semester, it aligns with the systems. Drugs acting on the nervous system, think sedatives, antidepressants, epilepsy meds, and drugs related to endocrine and reproductive systems, like diabetes treatments, contraceptives, hormone therapies.
Right. Then pathology is when things go wrong. The study of disease.
Exactly. Pathology looks at the causes and effects of diseases. What changes happen in the tissues, the organs. Often involves looking at samples under a microscope, too. So they'll study diseases of the central nervous system. Infections, strokes, tumors, and diseases affecting endocrine glands like the thyroid or pancreas, or reproductive organs, breast cancer, prostate issues, and so on.
And microbiology and parasitology cover the infectious side of things.
Right. Microbiology focuses on bacteria, viruses, fungi, how they cause disease, how we fight them. In this semester, the focus is on infections hitting the nervous system or the genital system. Parasitology is similar, but focuses specifically on parasites, like ones causing brain infections or sexually transmitted ones like trichomoniasis. These seem to be taught in slightly shorter blocks, maybe 6 weeks each.
Okay. And finally, biochemistry brings in the chemistry, the molecular level.
Yeah, biochemistry is the chemistry of life, basically. How molecules like proteins and hormones work, how chemical reactions are controlled, lectures and lab sessions. Topics would include things like how hormones actually signal inside cells, the biochemistry behind thyroid disorders or diagnosing diabetes, pregnancy tests, the chemical nuts and bolts.
It's really striking when you list them like that, how they're not learning these in isolation. It's the anatomy of the brain, the physiology of the brain, the pathology of the brain, all around the same time.
Exactly. That's the whole point of the integrated systems approach. It's designed to help them build a much more holistic understanding of how one system works, how it can fail, and seeing it through all these different scientific lenses at once.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And that leads nicely into the Research and Biostatistics module, RBS 403. Because medicine isn't static, right? It's evidence-based. So this module introduces them to how medical research is done. Different study types, descriptive studies, analytic ones like case control or cohort studies, experimental trials, and crucially, biostatistics, how to actually understand and use statistics in health contexts, evaluating screening tests, measuring mortality rates.
So they're learning how to critically appraise the information they're going to be bombarded with throughout their careers. That seems vital.
It really is.
And then there's early clinical experience 3, ECE 404. This sounds like where they start, putting it all together with actual people.
It is, yeah. ECE is about beginning that translation from science to practical skills. The guide emphasizes professional obligations right from day one, and it focuses heavily on those absolute core clinical skills. History taking.
Learning how to talk to patients, how to listen effectively.
Precisely. And physical examination, learning the systematic way to assess the human body.
So they must start immediately applying some of that anatomy and physiology knowledge they're learning in the other modules.
Absolutely. The module has lectures and skill lab sessions where they practice the techniques, maybe on models or each other, and then clinical sessions where they start applying it, focusing on exams relevant to the systems they're studying, like neurological exams, maybe basic cardiac exams.
So the theoretical map starts connecting to the actual territory as a patient.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
The guide also mentions a couple of interesting sort of modern tools. Incision Academy, what's that about?
Yeah, Incision Academy. It's described as a surgical education platform. It's digital, offers high-quality videos, 3D anatomy models, step-by-step modules for procedures.
Surgical procedures already in year 2.
Well, the procedures seem quite advanced. They mention it's accredited by the Royal College of Surgeons of England. But students are required to complete about 10 courses from a specific list. And looking at the list, it includes things like examining cranial nerves, assessing gait, neurological exams of limbs, different types of local anesthesia, examining the thyroid, the breast.
Okay. So foundational examiner techniques and basic procedures, maybe not complex operations yet, still using high-tech visuals early on.
Exactly. It blends technology with understanding clinical examination and basic procedural concepts right from the stage.
Fascinating. And the other thing was an e-portfolio.
Yes, the e-portfolio. This is basically a digital collection where students gather evidence of their learning, not just grades, but examples of their work, experiences, maybe case write-ups. And importantly, it includes their reflections on that learning process.
Reflections. So thinking about how they learned.
Precisely. They have specific tasks they need to complete and add throughout the semester. It really encourages self-assessment, thinking critically about what they did well, where they struggled, and tracking their own professional development. It's about learning how to learn, which is crucial for lifelong learning in medicine.
Okay. So putting it all together, semester 4 at Mansoura National University. It's clearly not just about memorizing facts. It's this really deep, integrated dive into the body's core control systems, nervous, endocrine, reproductive.
Yeah, seen through all those different scientific lenses, simultaneously anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology.
And then layered on top of that, you have the foundations of research and evaluating evidence, those crucial first steps in actual clinical skills, like talking to and examining patients.
And using modern digital tools like Incision Academy for visualization and the ePortfolio for self-reflection and tracking that growth. It's designed to be incredibly comprehensive and, well, intense.
It really highlights that becoming a doctor is about mastering huge amounts of information, yes, but also about integrating it, applying it, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right from year 2, definitely underscores what the guide said about needing effort, discipline, and commitment.
Absolutely. And seeing this level of structured support and resources, you can understand why they frame it as, an amazing opportunity for a great future. They're providing the tools.
It makes you think, though, about learning in general, doesn't it? For anyone listening. As you gain knowledge, maybe even from a deep dive like this one, how do you make sure you're not just sort of collecting facts like stamps? How do you actively work to connect them, reflect on them, and build that richer, integrated understanding that lets you actually use what you've learned?